What are some warning signs of predatory behavior that you believe more people should be aware of? One of the biggest warning signs for predatory behavior is actually internal rather than external. If you grew up in an abusive environment, you likely, consciously or unconsciously, developed a set of coping mechanisms to handle that environment. Then even after you leave the environment, if you encounter a predatory or abusive person, there's a high probability that those coping mechanisms will kick in and you will respond to them in a manner that is noticeably different, and likely seems more tolerant or even welcoming, than other people, which in turn will cause them to feel drawn to you and more comfortable being abusive towards you. So learning to recognize your own psychology and change your behavior will go much further in keeping abusive people out of your life than simply learning to spot them in the wild. Swooping in when people are emotionally vulnerable, funerals, divorces, depression, etc. I knew a guy in university who profited from the funerals of a friend of ours and of his girlfriend's dad. I only attended the first funeral, where he turned all the focus on himself, making up stories in the eulogy to seem closer to our dead friend. His girlfriend told me about the other funeral. He apparently did the same thing and they broke up shortly after. And my mom got a ton of invitations from friends who were psychics and MLM salespeople when my parents got divorced. They figured that a woman in her situation would be more willing to give them money for palm readings, aura readings, kitchenware, lotion, etc. Invading your personal space and not moving when they know it's making you uncomfortable. The person who assaulted me did this. He was a coworker and he would get incredibly close to me, and when I told him that it made me uncomfortable he would get offended. I was 20 at the time and I was a lower rank than him, so after the third time telling him to give me space he flipped out again and made sure to tell the entire company that I was a drama starter. I stopped tell him that it made me uncomfortable so people would back off. So he started to do it again and it slowly started to escalate. First his hand on my shoulders, then my waist, and then he would just feel free to grab at me in certain areas. Of course I would push him off and walk away, but he never stopped until he got what he wanted. Possessiveness, needing you to respond all the time or tell them where you are and when. This might seem obvious, but I've played it off as, oh, he cares. Easy one to miss is people talking in generalities. They are trying to emotionally manipulate you. Example, everyone thinks you're a loser but not me. Always consider statements in generalities as the person speaking's opinion only. If you realize you walk on eggshells around them, you avoid saying things because you don't want to upset them or start an argument. In the beginning you might not even realize what you're doing and you just brush it off. Don't brush it off. They'll pick fights over completely contradictory things. One week they'll throw a tantrum because you beat them at a game, the next week they'll guilt trip you for letting them win. The real goal isn't for them to resolve a dispute, it's to argue so much that you get exhausted to the point you always let them have their way. Word salad. When people pretend to explain something to you but instead of breaking it down and using language you understand, they throw big jargons and examples you cannot relate to. It is meant to intimidate you and render you powerless. It is only human nature to feel a little embarrassed when we could not understand certain things. If you stay silent to avoid embarrassment, you fall for their trap. People who are skilled at this also know the more scrambled info they throw at your brain, the more overwhelmed and vulnerable you get, so you may eventually break down and do what they want you. I have had many experience with this with people who are supposed to have my best interest. HR, people I am getting into business deal with, bankers, lawyers. Wait, never mind, those are not people who are supposed to have my best interest. Cutting off the friendship group. My ex-best friend's boyfriend came off as super sweet, shy and charming, so she was smitten. Then, very slowly he basically broke her away from our friendship group by making comments like, oh, they're jealous you're not single anymore, and they still are. And that we were creating waves over nothing. We saw loads of red flags from the start and we tried pointing it out to her, but by that point it became pretty obvious she was wrapped around his finger. putting on the nice guy image and doing everything they possibly can to convince you that they are nice and good, but they keep pressuring you, expecting rewards from you for their nice behavior, and expecting way too much from you. Being way too keen to establish themselves as a victim, giving a personal sob story before it's appropriate or necessary. Abusive people often see or at least portray themselves as the biggest victim even while they're hurting someone else. No empathy for you, they just want you to feel for them. Seeking out the loners or outcasts in a group and further separating them from the group. This is not to be confused with seeking them out and trying to get them to join the group, which well-meaning people do. Boundary testing. This is when they do something kind of bad to see how the person reacts, like accidentally touch their bottom or make an inappropriate joke. They are testing the waters. Red flag. Love bombing. It's a technique used by cults and by abusive partners to manipulate emotions and bind the victim to the person/group. Manipulation. Can't overstate this. They will manipulate you into thinking you are the one who's wrong, or if that doesn't work, they will manipulate you into pitying them. Of course, all of us do these things to the extent, but if there's no improvement, run. Another thing is if they suggest something weird, cruel, or otherwise inappropriate, and they might do that in a playful, half-serious sort of way. It's definitely a warning sign. Abusers will frequently ask their target early on in a relationship if they've ever been hurt before. Ultimately they're looking for an excuse when they become abusive, as in, they'll say there's something wrong with the target that makes other people abuse them. They have a way of building you up while breaking you down. They will say you're beautiful or handsome but treat you like you're as dumb as a rock, or say you're ugly but you're nice/smart. They're always busying patting your head while they're slapping your face. It's their way of keeping you off stride, feeling unbalanced. They need you to lose confidence, even if they say they admire your confidence, and they're also working on cutting you off from the herd. Victim blaming. Whenever you confront the person about something, they turn it around and make you feel like you've done something wrong. It gets really bad because you are apologizing for something you didn't do. If this ever happens, try to focus on what the person did, because otherwise they will get away with what they did to you. Also, they will do this for everything you bring up. Also, with victim blaming, if they do apologize, they end up blaming everyone else but themselves, so they never really apologize.